The story begins in the middle of winter. People are whispering about a rumor, a madman who goes berserk on the battlefield. This man is a mercenary with lifeless eyes, as if he no longer cares about living. They say he always vanishes without a trace once the battle is over, but when war breaks out again, he always returns. Strangely, he constantly mutters the same words, safe again, especially whenever the Empire is involved. He storms across the battlefield like a raging tempest, leaving chaos in his wake. It doesn't even seem like he fights for money. No, he fights for his own vengeance. Rumors say it's because he was once a prince who destroyed his own kingdom. Others claim he's wandering the world, searching for a place to die. Yet the only answer he ever found was to destroy himself. That madman's name is Yuri Briole, the third prince of the fallen Briole kingdom. Once a name of royalty, now a stain of disgrace, remembered as the prince who brought down his kingdom with his own hands. 10 years earlier, the infamous traitor and the sole survivor of a ruined nation was gambling inside a casino. Back then, he was only 18 years old. Yuri loved gambling and always won his bets, to the point where even his companion wondered how he never lost. That companion was Hernando, a member of the court mage. When asked about his streak, Yuri simply shrugged, saying it was just luck, that he wasn't using any tricks to win. Then, grinning, he suggested one more round and told everyone to double their bets. But Hernando stopped him, saying they needed to return immediately. If they stayed any longer, they'd be late for the meeting. At that moment, angry gamblers surrounded Yuri's table, accusing him of cheating. They had no intention of letting him leave. Furious, they accused Yuri of foul play. Hearing their baseless claims, Yuri's anger boiled over. They even mocked him by dragging in the name of a prince and the empire, finally pushing him past his limit. In rage, Yuri flipped the table. Then he stood tall and shouted, "I am Yuri Briole, the third prince of Briole, and today you will all be reborn, at my hands." With that declaration, the fight erupted. And in the end, Yuri crushed them all by himself. Afterward, we cut to Yuri outside the casino, where he was speaking with a young woman. He explained that he was late because his father had suddenly called a meeting. He had even sent word that he would be delayed. He begged her to forgive him just this once. That woman was Yekaterina Ivarna, a princess of the empire. Ivarna scolded him, saying Yuri wasn't the only one making time for this meeting. She risked a lot just to sneak away and see him. Yuri admitted he understood, but pleaded with her to also understand his situation. With his father absent, Yuri had to be careful with every step he took, things he wasn't even supposed to reveal to her. Hearing that, Ivarna grew furious. Feeling as if Yuri didn't trust her, she ripped off the necklace he had given her and threw it aside. She told him that if he didn't believe in her, then the gift meant nothing. She warned Yuri never to contact her again, unless she was the one to reach out first. And with that, Ivarna stormed off, ignoring Yuri as he desperately called her name. Left behind, Yuri was at a loss, realizing there was no easy way out of his predicament. But unbeknownst to him, someone had been eavesdropping the entire time, hiding in the shadows behind him. From that moment onward, the fragile balance between Briole and the Empire was pushed to its breaking point. What began as petty provocations from the Empire quickly spiraled out of control, until full-scale war between the two nations erupted. After that, the Empire launched a full-scale invasion of Briole, plunging both nations into a devastating war. Years passed, and as the death toll continued to rise with no end in sight, Yuri fought desperately to defend Briole. But one by one, he began losing the people he trusted most. Among them was Briole's strongest warrior, Fiore Briole, renowned across the entire continent as unmatched in strength. With Fiore gone, the tides of war gradually shifted in the Empire's favor. At first, Yuri told himself it was nothing more than coincidence, refusing to face the truth. But after countless brutal battles and endless memories flashing through his mind, he could no longer deny it. The downfall of Briole began with Ivarna's betrayal, the only person to whom Yuri had revealed everything. When his father left Briole, the Empire's schemes fell perfectly into place. Their invasion came swiftly and without warning. At the time, Yuri hoped it was all just his paranoia. But the only reply he received to his desperate letter was a simple apology. The scene then shifts back to Yuri, still struggling to hold Briole together. By now, he had become the Empire's prime target. If Yuri fell, Briole would crumble with him. Eventually, Yuri grew sick of endlessly running, defending, and retreating. He decided to face his enemies head-on, and with his unmatched strength, Yuri cut down every foe in his path. But his rampage didn't last long. Surrounded on all sides by Imperial soldiers, Yuri realized his end had finally come. Cornered, his sword slipped from his hand, and he closed his eyes, ready to accept death. But at that very moment, someone appeared, shielding Yuri from the enemy's strike. That man was Laurent. He urged Yuri to hold on, assuring him that Briole's forces would protect him. Seeing Laurent fighting alone against overwhelming odds, Yuri shouted his name, desperate to help. But his soldiers stopped him, forcing Yuri to flee for Briole's survival. With a heavy heart, Yuri left Laurent and the others behind on the battlefield. He eventually hid inside a house cluttered with furniture, though Imperial troops still pursued him relentlessly. As Yuri crouched in hiding, he thought to himself, he couldn't just cower there forever. He had to break through the encirclement, regroup, and continue Briole's fight for the future. At the same time, a burning question haunted him. What had happened to his father, who still hadn't returned? Was he already killed by the Empire? Then someone suddenly entered the house. Panic set in. Yuri thought, if he died here, Briole's future would die with him. Pleading desperately, he begged the man to save him, insisting Briole's army could not resist without him. The stranger simply replied that Yuri didn't need to say a word. The Empire would pay for everything they had done. Imperial troops would arrive any moment, so Yuri had to leave immediately. Without hesitation, Yuri escaped, vowing to live on and one day rebuild Briole, to exact vengeance against the Empire. But those were nothing more than empty dreams. The world was far harsher than he imagined, and rebuilding a kingdom was no simple task. In the end, everyone died, leaving only Yuri behind. Even his own memories began to fade. The only thing he remembered was to keep swinging his sword, to punish himself, because someday someone would come to end his cursed existence. We return now to Yuri's final moments, when he was confronted by a soldier. The man told him that Yuri had always been searching for a place to die, that he constantly charged headfirst into the most dangerous fronts, throwing himself into hopeless battles again and again, all just to feel some fleeting sense of peace. In the end, all Yuri ever achieved was destroying himself. The soldier sneered, calling Yuri selfish, that even death was far too merciful for him. Yuri scoffed, saying the soldier talked too much, as if he could actually kill him. But then the soldier called him by name, Yuri Briole, the third prince. Hearing that, Yuri was stunned. How could this man know his past? Everyone who remembered that name should already be dead. The soldier then removed his helmet and declared that everything was Yuri's fault, that all the tragedies, all the bloodshed, happened because of him. And when Yuri saw the man's face, he froze in shock. It was Laurent, the very man he thought had died long ago, protecting him on the battlefield. Without hesitation, Laurent raised his sword and charged. His blade pierced straight through Yuri's chest. Yuri didn't resist. He just stood there in silence, his mind overwhelmed by the absurdity before him. As death closed in, Yuri thought to himself, he had believed that dying would finally bring him peace. But instead, the guilt lingered, like a curse that would never leave him. Then he remembered a saying, the blood of Briole will never cast aside its honor, even if it means death. And with that, Yuri opened his eyes, awakened by someone shaking him. He had been unconscious for 3 days without stirring once. The man who woke him was his father. Staring at him in disbelief, Yuri wondered how this was possible. Hadn't his father already died? Was this hell, where he was fated to be alongside his father forever? Yuri muttered that his father must have lived a decent life. His father frowned and smacked him on the head in annoyance. Angered, Yuri shouted back, saying his father should repent. How could he still keep his bad habits even here in hell? But then, a single leaf drifted past Yuri's eyes, carried by the wind. In that moment, he realized this wasn't hell. There were no sinners here, no purgation, no demons mocking or tormenting him. So, where was he? The weight of the truth hit him all at once, and Yuri fainted. He had returned, back to the past, back to when he was just 13 years old. At first, he thought it must be a dream, or perhaps his life was flashing before his eyes in his final moments. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't wake up. The world kept moving forward, events unfolding exactly as they had before. He had no choice but to accept reality. He had truly gone back in time, to that spring when he was still a boy of 13. Not long after, Yuri was roused by his maid, Ina, because he had asked her to wake him. She reminded him that it was time for sword training with his instructor. Hearing that, Yuri jumped up and hurried to prepare, but Ina scolded him not to rush, offering to help him get ready. In his previous life, Ina had died within the castle walls. Yuri himself had seen her lifeless body. The memory struck him so deeply that he suddenly told Ina to slap him, not once, but 3 times, and as hard as she could. Startled, Ina asked if Yuri was ordering her to commit treason. Yuri calmly replied, "It's not treason if I command it." She pressed him again. "Are you sure?" Yuri nodded. "I'm sure. I always keep my word." Without hesitation, Ina smacked him across the face, again and again, until Yuri cried out in pain. His cheeks swelled instantly. He had forgotten just how strong Ina was. After that, Yuri headed to training with his face still red and puffy. The people who saw him didn't even bother to ask what happened. No one offered him medicine, or even a word of sympathy. Meanwhile, Yuri was training with his sword instructor, Bernard. Just like everyone else, Bernard didn't even bother asking about Yuri's swollen cheek. He didn't correct Yuri's stance either. They were merely sparring casually. This made Yuri wonder, since when did Bernard's lessons turn into nothing but sparring? He remembered how, in the past, Bernard once told his father that Yuri possessed natural talent. If only Yuri had trained diligently, he could have become the pride of Briole. Yuri realized this must have been the time right after Bernard said those words. Back then, because of his own laziness, Bernard eventually gave up, and only sparred with him instead of teaching seriously. Hearing Bernard praise his talent had actually made Yuri slack off even more. But this time, Yuri was determined. He called out to Bernard and declared that from today onward, he wanted proper training, because from this moment, he would be serious. Bernard raised an eyebrow, intrigued by Yuri's sudden change of heart. With a smirk, he replied, "Very well, then I'll train you seriously. Not tomorrow, but right now." Without hesitation, Bernard unleashed his strength and lunged at Yuri. Fortunately, Yuri managed to block the strike just in time. Panicked, he begged Bernard to slow down, only now recalling that Bernard was once known by the terrifying title, the Sword Demon. But Bernard pressed the assault, striking again and again until Yuri was thoroughly defeated. Had Yuri not carried the experience of his previous life as a mercenary, he would have been left battered and broken. Though exhausting, Yuri knew that if he truly dedicated himself to training, his progress would be rapid. On the other hand, Bernard found himself surprised. Yuri had handled far more of his attacks than he expected. Since when had this boy improved so much? Just then, Ina rushed over, calling for Yuri. His father was looking for him. Startled, Yuri asked why. Ina explained that Count Johannes and his son had arrived at the Briole estate. Hearing this, Yuri froze. Memories from his past life came flooding back. Johannes and his son were the very ones who betrayed Briole and opened its gates to the Empire. That son's name was Got Barkvar. With a chilling glare, Yuri asked Ina, "Where is that boy right now?" Later, during the welcoming feast, Johannes greeted Yuri warmly, commenting on how much he had changed, so much that he was barely recognizable. He even praised Yuri's physique, saying it had improved remarkably. Yuri's father, however, looked puzzled, joking that his son must have eaten something strange. Johannes chuckled and said, "If that's the case, then please give some to God as well, so he too may change." Yuri's father countered, "Isn't Got already smart enough?" Johannes sighed, insisting that Got still had many shortcomings. Meanwhile, Got gazed with admiration at Yuri's eldest brother. But when his eyes met Yuri's, he was met with a sharp, piercing glare, as if Yuri despised him. Yuri's second brother noticed this, and asked what was going on between them. Without hesitation, Yuri answered, "He stabbed me in the back." His brother smirked, teasing him. "And you're just going to let that slide?" Yuri, however, spoke inwardly to himself. On the outside, Got carried himself with false dignity, always averting his gaze so he wouldn't have to meet others' eyes. It was his habit, but under Yuri's unrelenting stare, Got began to grow uneasy, until irritation and anger finally showed in his own eyes. Their gazes clashed, heavy with tension. In that moment, Yuri made up his mind. This time, he would change Got. He would strip away that resentment to prevent the betrayal of the past from ever happening again. If Yuri's memory was correct, the two of them were fated to fight soon anyway. He then wondered, could it be that Got betrayed Briole in his past life because of a grudge against me? Determined, Yuri challenged Got to step outside for a duel. He told him, "This kingdom has no use for knights with narrow minds." Got frowned and replied that he wasn't even a knight yet. But Yuri shot back, "That doesn't matter. You're already destined to become a knight who will protect this kingdom's future." So, Yuri challenged Got to a duel right then and there. Without any hesitation, he charged forward to strike, but Got managed to block his attack. Yuri then kicked up dirt, clouding Got's vision. Outraged, Got shouted that Yuri wasn't acting like a knight at all, resorting to cheap tricks instead of honorable combat. But Yuri only smirked, dropped his wooden sword, and rushed in barehanded. Caught off guard, Got froze. He hadn't expected Yuri to discard his weapon. By the time he realized it, Yuri was already in front of him. With a swift kick, Yuri sent Got sprawling to the ground. Towering over him, Yuri declared, "Don't you dare sell your father's honor to the Empire like you did in my previous life." He reminded Got that his father was a great count and an honorable knight. "Tell me," Yuri pressed, "why do such titles and positions exist? And what are they meant for?" Deep down, Yuri already knew that Got had no desire to live that way. That was exactly why, in this second life, he would make sure Got didn't become the weak-minded knight he once was. Confused, Got muttered that he didn't really understand what Yuri was talking about. But Yuri pressed further. "Why is your father a count, and who gave him that authority? From now on, no matter what situation you face, try to look at the essence of things. Think deeply about what I just told you." Got, still shaken, nodded and said he would. With that, he walked away. Not long after, Yuri's older brother approached him, smirking. "Not bad. You weren't half bad back there." He then asked, half joking, if Yuri had always been good at fighting. Yuri shot back confidently. "Of course. I'd never lose to Got." "What, did you really think so little of me that you're surprised I won against him?" His brother laughed and replied, "Obviously, you're nothing but a troublemaker, the biggest gambler and nuisance in all of Briole." But Yuri shook his head. "I won't be like that anymore, and you'd better stop causing problems too." His brother gave him a puzzled look and asked if he'd gone insane. Yuri only answered with a smile. Later that afternoon, Yuri finished another round of intense training. Bernard told him that was enough for the day, but added that it was now time for Yuri to begin learning mana cultivation. Surprised, Yuri asked if Bernard would be teaching him his own personal method, but Bernard shook his head. "My level is far too advanced. You'll start with the Briole method." Yuri frowned and asked why he had to use that one. Bernard explained, "Because it's an excellent mana technique. Its energy is pure, and its efficiency is unmatched." The Briole method was something Yuri had already mastered in his previous life. It was a technique he had honed to a certain level as a mercenary. Hearing Bernard's words made Yuri recall something important. He immediately asked Bernard to recommend someone from the Royal Guard, someone with exceptional talent beyond their current abilities. Yuri remembered there was one skill he had never managed to touch in his past life. After some thought, Bernard mentioned a name, Jared. In his previous life, Yuri had met Jared near the end of the war. At that time, Jared's skills seemed ordinary, but the fact that he had survived so long among mediocre fighters could only mean one thing. Jared's potential was extraordinary, even if hidden. Back then, Jared had confessed his frustration, saying, "If only I could turn back time, I would have trained with everything I had." But Yuri told him, "There's no point regretting it now." The truth was simple. Jared's hidden talent had remained dormant because he never sharpened it. By the time war arrived, he had become nothing more than a rusted, fragile sword. This time, Yuri rose to his feet, determined. He would meet Jared now, in this life, before it was too late. Because Jared had to realize that training was everything, and laziness could no longer be an option. This video ends here, but the story isn't over yet. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss the next part.